Today we are going to learn something about pollination. The process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma is simply known as pollination. The process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma is known as pollination. Now let us see types of pollination. Types of pollination. Pollination is very important because pollination ultimately leads to fertilization, which is very necessary for the development of embryo and which is the future baby plant. Now let us see types of pollination on the basis of source of pollen. Okay, on the basis of source of pollen grains, pollination can be divided into three main types. So let us see the first one, which is known as autogamy. Autogamy. So here we can see combination of two words, autogamous. Auto means self. Gamous means marriage, self-marriage. So autogamy, when the process or when the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma takes place within the same flower. When the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma occurs within the same flower, it is known as autogamy. The example of autogamy or autogamous plants are many. For example, master plant, the most common flower, the China rose, all these are autogamous flowers. The pollination occurs within the same flower. The transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma occurs within the same flower. This is known as autogamy. There are certain conditions for autogamy. Okay? Now, what happens in autogamy? The maturity of the pollen grains, the release of the pollen grains, and the receptivity of the stigma should synchronize. That means the release of the pollen grains, the maturity of the pollen grains, and the receptivity of the stigma should be simultaneous. If pollen grains matured early, before the stigma becomes receptive, autogamy may not take place. Isn't it? So, pollen release and stigma receptivity should synchronize. Now let us see second type. This is gaetano-gamy. Okay? Gaetano-gamy. The best example here is maize plant. Maize. Okay, maize plant. Many grasses. Gaetano-gamy means marriage between the neighbors. Here, self-marriage. Here, marriage between the neighbors. When the transfer of pollen grains from a male flower, anther of a male flower, to the stigma of a female flower takes place within the same plant, it is known as gaetano-gamy. When the anther of the male flower to the stigma of the female flower but produced in the same plant. It is known as gametogamy. For example, maize. Maize, suppose this is maize plant. Okay, suppose this is maize plant. This is maize plant, and suppose this is corn cob. This is fruit. Okay, here at the top there are male flowers. Here, what happens? Here there are, this is corn cob. The hair-like tassels, they represent the stigma and the style. This is female flower. This is what we call as fruit. This is female flower. The tassels are nothing. They are stigma and the style. And when the male flower, when the pollen grains in the male flower gets matured, what happens? So, with the help of wind or insect or various agencies, when they are brought down, they are entrapped by this stigmatic surface or the tassels, and the pollination takes place. This is an example of gametogamy. Okay, that means the transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma, produced by two different flowers but in the same plant. It is called gametogamy. And the third one, it is known as xenogamy. Xenogamy, marriage between the strangers. Self-marriage, marriage between the neighbors. This is marriage between the strangers. When the transfer of pollen grains from anther of a male flower or produced in a plant takes place in the stigma of a female flower in a separate plant, it is known as xenogamy. The process of transfer of pollen grains from male plant to a female plant is known as xenogamy. For example, the best example here is papaya. So, briefly, these are different types of pollination or kinds of pollination on the basis of the source of pollen grain. Now let us see agents of pollination. Now let us see agents of pollination or agencies of pollination. Agents of pollination. Agents of pollination. So, broadly, these agents of pollination, we can divide them into abiotic agents and biotic agents. Abiotic agents and biotic agents. These abiotic agents, again, we can name them as wind, water. So, this biotic or living agents, insects, birds, bats, even animals, and the technical term used for this, suppose wind, anemophily, water, hydrophily, insects, entomophily, birds, ornithophily, and bats, chiropterophily. Chiropterophily. So let us see one by one the various agencies of pollination. They are broadly divided into biotic agents and abiotic agents and biotic agents. In abiotic, it can be wind or it can be water current. And in biotic, insects, birds, bats, even